All right. Happy Monday. Happy Monday, everybody. This is Grace and Gossip, where we have graceful, sophisticated conversations about today's pop culture, what's happening, the who, what, when, where, and why of pop culture. As you guys probably know, pop culture is in a frenzy. And tonight, on Monday, what are we at? April 28th. We are in a frenzy, and a lot of it is because of what's going on in the sports world. So if you're just joining me tonight, you should be excited to know that we have an expert joining us. Last week, we had my good friend, journalist Ryan Dennis joined us. And tonight, I have another good friend of mine who is a former NFL player who is going to join us to talk about the Shedeur Sanders incident. We're also going to talk, of course, about Uncle Shay Shay. You know, we can't get through this week. We can't start this week off without talking about how we ended last week. But before we have, the boys come on, I wanted us to talk about the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Come on. Valerie, welcome to the first live. I think you will enjoy the live better because we get a chance to kind of talk back and forth about what's going on. But I'm excited for you guys to be here tonight because, like I said, before we bring the boys' conversation in, I wanted us to talk a little bit about what happened last night on Housewives and what is potentially going to play out through the rest of the season. Now, you guys know season 16, long-awaited. Housewives took a hiatus for almost a little over a year, to try to figure out who were they bringing on, who were they letting go, how this dynamic was going to work. And then when they did figure that out, they had OGs Kenya Moore and also Porsha returned for the first time since leaving the series 3 seasons ago after. I don't believe that you can take someone's man, because I think a man has to want to be taken. I don't think you can really just take someone's man, but she definitely absconded from the situation with a married man, right? She had a married man that was now her main love interest. And then she also had Dennis McKinley as her daughter's father. They were engaged. They were never married, but that was her daughter's father. So she had both of those men kind of like in her wheelhouse, trying to convince Dennis that he needed to be okay with her and Simon, who initially belonged to Fallon. But all that happened years ago. Porsha did Portia's Family Matters. That was a disaster. And then we just didn't see her for a couple of seasons. During those seasons, as you guys know from watching the blogs, Porsha had an overly elaborate 3 weddings. I believe there was one in Nigeria, one traditional, and then another one that was like private. And then 15 months later, they are in the process of divorce. So that is where we pick up with Porsha again. But ironically, in all this divorce with Simon, I believe, and I wrote an article, as you guys know. If you don't know, if you're new to the live, you will know that I write about reality TV. I'm a features writer, reality features writer for Collider, in addition to editor-in-chief for Lennox and Parker. And so I write pieces on some of this reality food. So an article said, I believe Porsha Williams does everything with her ex, Dennis McKinley, in mind. My points for this article were, as you see here, Porsha Williams creates drama over romantic relationships on Real Housewives of Atlanta. She moved on to Simon, but wants to keep Dennis involved. And then lastly, Porsha sees Dennis as her possession, but does not want him. I firmly believe that. I stand on that last point. Porsha sees Dennis as her possession, but she does not want him. Now, a lot of women can relate to that, right? Because especially with someone, I will admit, especially with someone that you've had a child with, and if you've been married, like, it can be uncomfortable to see an ex that you've been very close with involved with someone else. It does not always feel good, right? We know that it happens and we always want to move on, but sometimes it can sting to see them in a relationship with someone else. And I think, or even entertaining it, right? Other people seeing them as an option feels bad to us. Hey, you there says her taste in men is amphibian. Her taste in men has nothing to do with anything aside from the almighty dollar, right? And I think we know that. I don't even think Porsha tries to hide that. I think she's very clear with that. But talking about this season, so Porsha comes back, Kenya comes back, but unfortunately, through a situation that we talked about last week, Kenya ends up leaving. Housewives. And last week, Kenya announced that she was going to start a YouTube channel. Now, up until now, Kenya has been one of the only women that did not do most of the Housewives or any reality star at this point. They start a YouTube channel, right? Kenya had not done that until recently, because after getting into it with Britt Edie, you guys know the drill. Britt threatened her with a firearm. Kenya blew up pictures of her involved in a escapade with a allegedly young Berg, and Kenya was released from the show, which a lot of people, including myself, feel like was unfair. So now we only have Porsha as a main character left as an OG, and also Cynthia Bailey, who we love, but Cynthia's a friend of the show this season. She doesn't have an official peach, and she's not really giving much. Besides just, they throw her in there to like add context, but there's not really anything going on with her storyline. Yes, that is allegedly the young man. He has another name now. I don't even remember his new name, but I was introduced to him years ago as Young Berg, so I don't know what the new name is, but something that he's a songwriter. Now, he is a songwriter, very well-known songwriter, hitmaker, yes. Yeah, okay. He transferred from Young Berg to hitmaker. I guess that's better, but he was on Love and Hip Hop. He's a hot mess. But anyway, that is allegedly who she was performing with or on or to in the video. And he also was on Love and Hip Hop. As you guys know, if you watched last week, I brought, there was some footage from her being made up for a Penthouse Pet series with Stevie J. So obviously she had a lot of friends on Love and Hip Hop, which probably explains her need to be on reality TV. Anyway, tonight's not about Britt Edie. Tonight I want to talk about Dennis, Porsha, and Angela Oakley. But really, let's talk about Dennis and Porsha. So like I said, I believe, hey, Haitian Empress, hey, what's up, twin? I believe that Porsha sees Dennis as her property. I think she sees Dennis as a man that will always have a thing for her, and she could possibly be correct. And I also think that she knows, I think Dennis and Porsha have a behind the scenes relationship based on their past that allows her to feel that confidence. I will say this based on my interview. I interviewed Dennis years ago when he and Porsha were married. And you know how women, we can usually tell if a man is really into his woman, right? And I think part of it is definitely the television thing, right? But I also think when I was interviewing him, he was really, really into like helping her amplify her brand. I don't think at that point she had really went hard with the go naked hair. I know that Dennis was into selling weave. He had bundles, Dennis is a serial entrepreneur. As I mentioned, I've never known him to be into the music, but hey, anything can happen in Atlanta. If there's a place where anything can happen, it is here. So Dennis and Porsha, when I interviewed him, he was extremely supportive. He said that he wanted to amplify her brand. He saw her as a really big brand. And, to his point, he was right. I mean, Porsha's business has definitely gotten bigger and has grown, even though she's no longer on Dish Nation, she still really has upped her game when it comes to entrepreneurship with her hair. And, she does, like, I think it's QVC or the other one, but she does a lot of that. I mean, she's her product lines are doing really well, and she's got it together in that area. And initially she did not. And I think a lot of that could probably be due to Dennis, just because he was a serial and successful entrepreneur. But I do believe that background and that foundation and that place to lean offers Porsha a safe place to land. So even though the situation now is over with Simon, she goes right back to this relationship with Dennis. Now, earlier today there were some text messages exchanged back and forth between Ralph Pittman, who is Drew's estranged husband, and Simon. Now, if you guys are not aware, Drew is currently in the process of divorcing Ralph. Did an article on that as well. But Drew is a hot mess. Drew, we know, lies. And I basically talks about that, the fact that Drew wanted to keep the divorce document sealed. The courts did not go along with that. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing some information about Drew released very, very soon, on the show, because that's where we're at on the show. On the show, the judge has ruled that Drew cannot keep the divorce document sealed. And she alleges that she wanted to keep everything sealed because of Ralph. We know better, because Drew doesn't care if Ralph is uncovered as a cheater. She's been calling him a cheater for years, right? And so Dennis is now Drew's bestie. And so he and Ralph got into it on social media. Now, I always have to be aware that some of this stuff could be lies, right? Some of this could be for the optics and to get people talking and to get things, excited, people excited about the show, to make the storylines hotter, to make people trend, the stories trend on social, which makes them trend online. I don't know if I trust this, but let's humor it. Let's humor it anyway. So Dennis, who we know is, and shouts out to the Jasmine brand for capturing these shots. Dennis is, of course, the HNIC on Drew's music project. And she has a bunch of music she's dropping. She's dropping all kinds of music. So Dennis says, the Delulu video, who wants it? At Drew Shedeur. Tell Drew to drop it. Tag Drew and tell him to drop it. Drew has a little dancing girls underneath, which means she's all about it, right? And then Ralph chimes in. He says, yo, you wild for trying to exploit me. Didn't you cheat on Porsha while she was pregnant? Y'all gonna make me turn up in a minute. Now, that's interesting, because Porsha has been talking about the fact that she was upset that Drew and Dennis were hanging out, right? She didn't like the fact that anyone was hanging out with her child's father. Ralph has voiced his own concerns lately, right? So he actually addressed Dennis. He didn't even address Drew. He addressed Dennis, who is helping Drew put out the music. I would assume Dennis is probably bankrolling it, because he would have the money. Drew probably would not. Or at least not enough, right? I mean, I'm sure she has some money. I don't know if she would have enough to bankroll it, or maybe he's just an investor. Maybe she does have enough. He's just coming in as an investor. It's interesting that Ralph addressed Dennis and not Porsha. I mean, not Drew, which is strange to me. So it goes on. Dennis says, Ralph Pittman Jr. invite me on the podcast. I guess we're overdue for a combo. And then Ralph says, done. Let's make it happen soon. Dennis said, let's do it. And yes, I did cheat. Porsha don't even bring that up no more. What day are we doing it? And then Ralph says, I'm happy for y'all. Monday. Ladies, if anything we can learn from this exchange is men will always get over stuff a lot easier than women do. Men, this is all play for them. they're playing back and forth. Dennis is unserious, and Ralph is unserious as well. He ain't really worried because he actually wanted the divorce unsealed. He doesn't care. They're just playing back and forth. And guess who's going to be the casualty of that war? Drew. Drew going to be the casualty of that war. Dennis admitted that he did cheat on Porsha, which was interesting. But Drew, according to Dennis from back in the day, Porsha cheated on him as well. I don't know if that's just what men say when they want to, get one up on the other person, but he was very convincing. And the way Porsha acted on Porsha's Family Matters, I believe it. But we don't know. So hopefully, I didn't know Ralph has a podcast, but obviously he has a podcast and Dennis is going on or they're sitting down. I don't know. But I'll keep you guys posted. I guess next Monday. And again, this could all be this could all be their way of trying to get us pulled into this storyline. I want to say, outside of this, Porsha and Dennis are clicked up, and Porsha has taken a note from Kenya Moore's book and decided to have her own YouTube channel. So Porsha and Dennis put up a post on her page today, and I'm going to play it for you guys. Let me play it, and then we'll talk. Let me see.
Wait, what? To have a home together. I'm going to ask the questions, and then if you want to answer it, you answer it. If you don't, then you don't.
Sure.
What if PJ wants another sibling?
We talked about that a long time ago. We should have went back to back.
How we going back to back and we broke up? You look exactly like the day you proposed.
That was a good day, though.
Yeah, it was fun. Except for the helicopter ride.
Even though we co-parents, we still go together.
What? Hold on. Tell them what it is.
Oh, like and subscribe to the Porsha Show. It ain't it. You get to go.
All right. Did y'all see the headline I had put up on that article? Every single time they always prove me right. Okay, so I don't know if Porsha and Dennis are co-starring or it's just Porsha. It looks like it's Porsha and Dennis. At first I was like, is Ralph coming on there with them? Like, what's happening? Why is Dennis making music with Porsha now? What is happening? I think that Porsha, number one, I always have to say that she is a beautiful woman, right? She's absolutely beautiful. And Dennis is probably still very into her, as most men would be, right? He's definitely still locked in. And I do believe that he was really, really, really into her when they were together. Now, I don't understand how into her he was to step out, but it could have been for TV. I don't know. But Porsha's doing a podcast. Don't Make Me Call Porsha. And it feels very much like Kenya Moore dropped a podcast. Kenya Moore's podcast was immaculate, flawless, all of that. And now Porsha dropped one. Do y'all want to see Porsha's podcast? I mean, do y'all want to see that podcast? He was flirting, but just the thing, Miss J. Reed, was he flirting or was he playing into the character? Was he really flirting or was he playing into character? I don't know, because you don't know. We don't know if he's being honest. We don't know if he's being serious. We don't know what. We don't know if he's trying to make good TV. We don't know what is happening here. So moving past that. So Porsha and Dennis got stuff cooking up. Drew, if you guys watch Sunday's episode, Drew shows up at Porsha's birthday. And these, I feel like these shows are becoming so antiquated. Like nobody really believes this is unscripted. Like who shows up to someone's birthday party when you know the person doesn't like you? Nobody, right? Nobody. Says Keith Sweat. Nobody, right? I won't sing it, but I thought about it, okay? I thought about it. Nobody shows up to someone's birthday, but Drew shows up via Angela's invite, Angela Oakley. Now, herein comes another issue for this foolish show. I'm really kind of like, over Housewives at this point, because the storylines just feel really silly and not authentic. So Angela, who's been having a rough time in the blogs, Angela is married to Charles Oakley. If you guys are not familiar with who that is him. Charles Oakley played for 10 seasons in the NBA. So she's got one, she's got one. She's got a pro ex-athlete. As I mentioned earlier, judging by the news right now, that may not be the best example of a man to have on your arm, but Charles Oakley is an ex-NBA player. They are married. They have had what she acknowledges to be some rocky times in their marriage, but they're allegedly together now. So she's mentioned that. That's kind of like her claim to fame on the show. My husband's a celebrity. My husband's a celebrity. My husband's a celebrity. Okay. So she invites Drew. Drew shows up. There's some tension there. She's like asking the ladies, are they okay? Because Drew is coming. Hey, you there? Yes, we're aware of her nose. I believe Shamia called it the nose that came from the 1990s. But I like Angela so far. I mean, she just seems out of place. She also seems very hot all the time, like she's dealing with menopause. She may want to talk about that because it's very obvious. She's always got a fan on. But he played 19 seasons in the NBA. I had bad information. Thank you there. Maybe he played 10 seasons with one team, because I did see that he played, I believe he was with one team for 10 seasons, maybe 19. Hey, he did his thing, right? That's a huge accomplishment to have been in the NBA for that long, right? Yes, he was with the New York Knicks for 10 seasons. My bad. So he played almost 20 seasons overall, but 10 with the Knicks, which being with one team for that long is impressive. All right, so I live here in Atlanta. I have heard some stories about Mr. Oakley. Porsha gets into it with Angela, and apparently Angela overheard a drunk Porsha saying that she should, when they got into it, saying that she should, she better watch out before she F's her husband. Did you guys hear that? Yeah, she basically threatened to, for her to calm down before she says she should F her husband. Now, I want to put up this picture again. There's Charles. I want to say, Angela, for all practical purposes, you should take that threat seriously. Right. For all practical purposes, you should take that threat seriously. Again, I don't believe that a woman can take a man, right? Cannot take a man. But sometimes men are out there wanting to be taken or open to foul play, right? And from what my gentle ears have heard, he is open to foul play. So I would just, if I could pull Angela to the side, I would say, sis, you want to be careful. You want to be careful, because I believe Porsha when she says something like that. I don't think that's to be taken lightly. I mean, the last time she brought someone on the show, she did indeed end up with her husband. So I don't take those threats lightly, and I don't think you should either, right? Because it's one thing, and I don't, there's very few men that you can stand up for and be like, I know my husband would not. Like, it's very few women that actually could stand up and say, I know my husband would not embarrass me like that. But I don't think Angela should be one of those women. I don't think she should do it. I would not. Porsha is a very beautiful woman. She is also very aware of her wiles. And Charles is very open. At least allegedly. I don't know him personally. I have been at different events where he was at. I have heard, my gentle ears have heard through the grapevine that there have been several women that have accused him of being open. Let's just say that. I don't know. I did not see. I'm just sharing with the people what my gentle ears have overheard. Okay. I definitely want Angela to take heed. I don't want her to get too caught up in what Drew has going on, because you will die on your sword trying to protect Drew. Okay. You don't need to be worried about her. Just like I don't want Kelly to die on her sword trying to protect Britt. Let Britt be a grown woman. You guys are both new on this show, but look out for yourself, girl. Let Britt do Britt. Now, Britt done got into it with Kenya. I don't think that's open. I don't think that's over. But Kenya's not on the show, but I don't think that's over. But I would suggest to both Kelly and Angela, as newbies, to let other people fight their own battles. Okay, don't get in Drew's battle. Not with Porsha. Not with Porsha. That is not the woman you want to battle with when it comes to your man. And if she said, I just believe, I could be wrong. My Libra intuition is pretty good, but I could be wrong. But I believe if Porsha said I should F her husband, I feel like she knew that she could. I'm so concerned about that. I'm so concerned. But that's neither here nor there. We will keep an eye on this developing story. How about that? We'll keep an eye on this developing story. As I told you guys, we have a guest that is going to be joining here in just a few minutes, because so much happened with Uncle Shay last week. But then over the weekend, we learned about the draft. A lot of women, it's funny because there are a lot of women that are tuned into the draft. I know women who actually go and pay attention and know the stats of the players, which is crazy to me. But hey sis, get it how you live, okay? So a lot of people knew that Shadur Sanders, who is the son of Deion Sanders, who looks just like a baby Deion, a mini me, did not get drafted in the first 3 rounds. And so that caused a big stink on social media and just in the sports world, period. And very seldom does sports intersect pop culture like this. But this conversation became one that took over social media, the news, and just people had so much to say. And I saw people speaking on both sides. And so I invited, like I said, a friend of mine who is also a journalist. He's a sports journalist, but he is a former NFL player. And I always like to tell people, I did an article today about the new Golden Bachelor, who is also a former NFL player. Like I said, sports is all over the news this week. Just Golden Bachelor, Matt Owens is a former NFL player. Oakley here is out of control on the Housewives, or at least allegedly out of control on the Housewives. And of course, Shannon has taken a turn. His professional persona has taken a turn. So I asked my good friend to come in. He always has great perspective, and he can kind of fill us in on the world of sports from a man's perspective who's actually been on the gridiron. So you guys, please help me welcome my friend Jamal Burke. He has a podcast titled Bottom Line Burke, and he is joining me tonight. Hey, Jamal.
Hey, Christal. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We got a lot to talk about.
I see.
We got a lot to talk about. Like I said, we're just wrapping up the Housewives. Our good friend, we'll call him a good friend of the show, Charles Oakley, is former NBA player, did his thing, 10 seasons with the Knicks, obviously almost 20 seasons in the NFL, did his thing. He's now on Housewives. It's interesting how sports, and I think athletes just have this mystique about them. And women obviously are excited about them. I don't think it's just because of how much money they make. I think it's definitely the physique, but it's also just the persona of someone that puts in that much work and is that passionate and that driven and that discipline that I think really creates this attraction. And they are now, especially over the last few months, a huge part of the pop culture conversation. Let's start with what I reached out to you about. Shadur Sanders, so much with this situation. But before we get started with Shadur, I want to ask you, as a former player, what are your what were your thoughts about Deion Sanders? Because he's, to me, one of the most memorable, impactful players in the game of football.
Yeah, well, Deion, we got to give him his due. He's the greatest cornerback to ever play the game. But I think also he was responsible for why his son Shedeur Sanders wasn't drafted into the 5th round overall, the 155th pick by the Cleveland Browns. I say that because prior to the draft, he went on his media circuit and he talked about how he's not going to allow his son to go to an organization that's not going to amplify his skill sets and that's not going to put him in a position of success. I think by doing that, it was offensive to a lot of organizations in NFL. And I think that when he said, Shedeur Sanders' ultimate goal is to get selected higher than Deion, who was a top 4 pick in the NFL draft back in 1989. I think that also was very disrespectful as far as the NFL personnel was concerned. And I think they spoke loudly about that because Shedeur Sanders did not participate in the NFL Combine, which is a no-no.
Oh, wow.
Unless you are a guaranteed top 5 pick, which he wasn't. And I just think that Deion Sanders put the perception out there to the public that he had power and favor that no one else knew about. But then when we found out in reality, unfortunately, he was powerless. Shedeur Sanders may have had Deion Sanders' last name, but he did not have Deion Sanders' game. And like I said, Deion was a top 4 pick. And I think that that's why a lot of NFL scouts and personnel thought Shedeur Sanders was arrogant because ever since he was a little boy, Deion Sanders was not only his father, but he was his football coach for his entire football career. So they say a lot of things are caught, a lot of things are taught. Him just being around his father for all those, 18, 19, 20, those decades, quite frankly, he's picking up habits, he's picking up sayings, he's picking up things he doesn't even know why he's doing or saying like that. And I think also Deion Sanders, being such a disruptive player and personality himself, put that into his son. And unfortunately, they decided how much or how little they was going to participate in. And I think they was penalized for that as a result.
Wow. Well, first of all, I didn't know he didn't participate in the combine. Let me ask you this, Jamal. Because for those of us that don't know football like you do, obviously, for what reasons would Deion not want him to go to particular teams? Where do you think that came from? Like, are there certain teams that he assumed would try to sabotage Shedur's success? Where do you think that line of thinking came from?
Well, I think the line of thinking came from because it's no secret there are a bevy of franchises in NFL, especially for the quarterback position. It is so imperative that you go to an organization that offensively runs the type of plays that will amplify and showcase your skill set, as opposed to just there's certain coaches, they only know how to coach one way. They only run certain plays one way. Regardless of what your skill set is, you either fit in or you don't. As opposed to there's very few coaches that kind of adapt their offense based off their quarterback skill set. So I think that was the most thing Deion was trying to identify and avoid, because that, like this franchise in the NFL, they're more concerned about being profitable business-wise as opposed to putting on a quality team on the field.
Wow. do those not always go hand in hand?
Correct. Right. I mean, ideally, one would think that every team's trying to win a Super Bowl, but that's just not, that's a fallacy. And there's so many quarterbacks over the last, 20, 25 years that have been top selections, number one, number two, number three, four picks, that quite frankly went to franchises and just never, ever got off to a good start. And quite frankly, that was the beginning of the end of their NFL career. And quite frankly, we're seeing that in real time with a few quarterbacks, but I don't want to get messy because it's happening in real time.
Okay. So Sunny Rain asked, so with that being said, because I didn't realize when I listened to what you said, I was like, that makes sense now because we know about Deion with Shedeur at Jackson and then at Colorado, but I didn't realize he had never been coached by anyone else. So she asked, with that being said, would his sons be coachable? Do you think that they would be coachable by anyone else?
Well, then that's the burning question. And I think that's why they said, in my opinion, I didn't receive any details, but I'm just speculating at this point. I think that's why a lot of NFL personnel who were in those rooms didn't score him quite well in the interview because he never separated himself from his father. Even in all the interviews leading up to the draft, at every turn, every chance he had, he inserted his father. And that's something that was alarming to a lot of NFL personnel, and that's why they scored him so poorly. Because, again, he has his father's name, but he does not have his father's game. But he asserts himself, and he has the charisma, the aura, and the confidence, and speaks with so much conviction and enthusiasm as if he was his father. But he's never established himself as a separate entity of his father. And when you're talking about the NFL, especially given that he's a quarterback, Christal, his payday are 9-figure minimums. So it is so critical that if I'm an investor, if I'm a scout and I co-sign or I endorse this player, I know that's the trajectory and that's ultimately the compensation that he's in line to receive. So I want to make sure that he's able to proverbial get off the titty, right, or the breast, and be able to sustain himself and develop himself outside of his father's coaching, presence, or guidance.
Okay. I got a couple people are asking, are you from Boston? He is from Boston.
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, went to Boston College, and then in the 2003 NFL draft, I signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah.
So there's been conversations about there's been other fathers that have done similar things that sons have not been penalized this way. A lot of people feel like it is a race call as opposed to it being about fathers. A lot of people have also said that when a Black father is involved, that is looked at and is categorized as negative, right? And I saw a post that had a picture of LeVar Ball, right? Joe Jackson. Oh my gosh, I should have screenshotted.
Joe Jackson from the music, or Michael Jackson's father.
Michael Jackson's father, and then also Serena and Venus's father, right? So, what do you think about the difference in when a father inserts confidence, right? Specifically, even because we saw that with Richard Williams and the Serena and Venus, the confidence that he instilled in them was, second to none. And it was the cockiness and the arrogance that we see both of them use on the court, which worked to their benefit. The other father was Tiger Woods' father, even though he did not necessarily identify as African American. Tiger didn't. His father was a Black father and did, was very, very hands-on with his son's golfing career. Do you see a difference? What do you think the difference is here with Deion and Shedeur?
Well, I think that there's a big difference in this particular situation. And I want to say in this isolated situation, most famously what's currently circulating the internet is Archie Manning, who is Peyton Manning's and Eli Manning's father.
Right.
Who was
My next line
NFL.
of question. Right.
I'm sorry?
I said that was my next line of question. Well, what about Eli?
Right.
Yeah.
So Archie Manning was an all-pro player, one of the best in the league, but his running style as a quarterback, he suffered a lot of injuries. So back in 2004, when his son Eli Manning, coming out of old Mississippi, or Mississippi University, and he was the undisputed #1 pick, he famously said that his son will not play for the then San Diego Chargers because he didn't feel comfortable or confident with the infrastructure in play, most notably the offensive line. Thus, history will repeat itself. So he was fearful that his son will get injured again. So then we all know he was traded to the New York Giants. That is vastly different. That's apples and oranges compared to what's happened this past weekend with Deion Sanders and his son Shedeur Sanders. With Eli Manning, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to be the unanimous #1 overall pick in 2004. His skill sets and his trajectory as far as what his skill sets would transfer into the NFL would be was not a non-issue, and he ended up having a Hall of Fame career. Conversely, with Shadur Sanders, there's nothing but questions. There is no clear telltale sign of how well or how poorly Shedur's skill set would transfer. Just like one of your audience member eloquently asked, will he or will he not be able to play effectively without his father? And that's the $1 million question. Nobody knows. I don't even think Shedeur Sanders knows. And so when you're talking about the NFL, it's a process-oriented, process-driven league. And so it's a reflection of who you are as an individual, and that's still unclear, rightly or wrongly. But just in closing, just with the idea of having a strong Black father that can pour into great habits, great discipline, great information. And the thing about a Black father that makes them so intimidating is because once they pour that into, let's say, Serena Williams and her sister Venus Williams, and the litany of other Black athletes, they're not just bringing the father, they're bringing the mother, they're bringing the aunt, they're bringing the ancestries, because that's what the father is going to instill into that particular athlete, is that it's not just you, you're representing the family's name, and not just currently, but in the past as well. So that's a very strong point. And I applaud, I celebrate, and I fully embrace and endorse all Black fathers and mothers to be a strong presence in their sons and daughters' athletic lives.
I wonder this, because I do see, Deion was, you said the word disruptive, and I can see that. I've always, working as a celebrity publicist, and I've worked with a few athletes as well. I feel like if the hype matches the talent, then we're okay, right? But a lot of times the hype may come first, or maybe, and I would assume, because most athletes, as I mentioned when I started this segment, to be a part of the talented 10, that takes probably a lot of ego, right? In order to sustain that, in order to go on the field. I know you gotta, you carry ego with you, you're a humble guy, but you're very confident, right? So how much of that, that bravado that we see in Shadur, do you think will benefit him on the field? Or do you think it's excessive for the level that he's at in his career right now?
Yeah, as far as the bravado, some say arrogance, I say confidence. It's an oxymoron to be successful in college or at the pro level without it.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody privately or publicly that never had it at all. 100% unanimously, every great athlete that I've encountered, they all have it. it's mandatory because you won't be able to survive in that environment.
Right.
Because you got the coaches pressuring you, you got the trainers, you got the weight coaches, you got your own positions on a daily basis. You're fighting for that position, and so there's a lot of pain involved. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of perplexity, and without that bravado, that inner self-talk, that persona that you create for survival purposes, like believing that you're not normal, you are some superhuman person. It's a calling from God that you're just following His orders. If you don't have that level of mentality of invincibility, or just believe that you could do something that is unimaginable or impossible, you will not make it. As a matter of fact, buddy, get ready to get out of town.
So Jamal, what would you want to see happen at this point with Shedeur? He was finally drafted in the 5th round. He's going to Cleveland. Is there a way for him to turn the situation around and make the naysayers, eat crow? And if so, how can he do that?
I think it's simple. He has to compete for the starting position, and when
we lost Jamal. You guys, let me know if you're still with us. Go ahead and put an XO in the chat if you're enjoying this conversation. We're getting ready to get into it with a little bit about our well, I don't know if he's our friend at this point, Shannon Sharpe, Uncle Shay Shay. We're going to talk to Jamal about that in just a second. So make sure that you put an XO in the chat. Let me know that you're still here. I'm sure Jamal accidentally dropped, but we'll be right back on. Thank you. Hey, Love is Mimi. Hey, Druzy Consumer. Miss J. Reed. Miss Adri. Is it Miss Adri, girl? Not my aunt, girl. We got to talk about Uncle Shay Shay. Jay, what's up? Tammy Bowles, yes, ma'am. No friend of mine. I get it. Jamal, you may want to go out, just turn your computer off and come back in, or your phone, whichever you're on. Go all the way out and come back in, and that'll probably be the best way. If you can hear me. Go all the way out and come back in, and that way, I think it just kicked him off. Thank you guys for those XOs in the chat. We're coming right back with Jamal Burke, aka Mr. Bottom Line Burke. Let me see if I can get him on text. Get him on text. I'm excited. I'm glad that we have football here, because you don't really know some of this information. There it is. I was just trying to text you, like, you got to go out and come back in.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Not Miss J. He said, uh-oh. He's off again. He's not a friend even before his current situation. Uh-oh, girl, why? You didn't like Shannon before? We don't claim Shannon anymore. Mwadi said we don't even claim him anymore. My God. You see how quick people just let people go?
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. All right, you're giving us the playbook for Shedeur. Can you hear me? Uh-oh, he's gone totally. I think the NFL didn't want their circus that the NBA had with Brown. I know. And I wanted to ask him, does he think, how would he, I'm going to ask him that before we get out of this, before we move on to Shay Shay, I want to ask him, does he feel, what are the commonalities between this and Bronny James and LeBron James? I get that, Haitian Empress. We're gonna talk about all of that. I'm gonna ask him about all that, because I feel like I definitely understand that line of thinking, and agree with it to some extent. But I also feel like people should just, if you prefer something different, be gone. And there are so many different, issues and things to unpack sometimes in that conversation. If you are just tuning in, we are talking with a good friend of mine, Jamal Burke. He is a former Atlanta Falcon, and he is stopping by to talk to us a little bit about, offer some insight and perspective on the Shedeur and Deion Sanders debacle that happened last week during the draft. Also, we're going to be talking to him about, his thoughts on Shannon Sharpe's position. As it seems, sports has taken a front seat in pop culture this week. And so that's why we here at Grace and Gossip are talking with Jamal all about sports. And I think we got him back. I think he's back. There he is. See, the last time you did that, it went out. I'm like, don't touch it. It went out.
Got me?
I got you. Okay, let's go back. So you were giving us the playbook for Shedeur.
Hold on.
Can you hear me?
A little bit. Let me see.
I don't want him to do that. I don't want his hand to do that.
I got you now.
Okay, you got me?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so
sorry about the technical difficulties.
It's all good. We got it. As long as we got you. This actually is better. You feel closer now. So playbook for Shedeur when he gets to Cleveland.
Damn.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Haitian Empress said, get yourself together, Burke.
Hold on.
Get your bottom line together.
Hold on.
That is, these internet streets are tough and are. Oh my gosh. Somebody said, Shannon.
I got it. I'm good. I'm back.
Okay. All right. We good. We're good. We're back.
Let's do it.
Back. All right. Let's pick it up. Yes, like the video. You guys could have been liking the video while Jamal was getting himself together. Okay. Jamal, what is the playbook? If you're Shadur Sanders, what are you doing when you touch down in Cleveland?
You're competing for the starting position. Currently, they have 5 quarterbacks on their roster at this time. So there's nothing else for him to do to prove everybody wrong that said that he should have been picked prior to the 5th round pick. And what his job is to, after he secures the starting position, lead the Cleveland Browns to a playoff berth and go as far as he can to the Super Bowl. That's a heavy
load. That's a heavy load. Last question on this particular situation, Jamal. Yeah. A lot of people are comparing it to Bronny James and LeBron James. And I think a lot of people felt that Bronny wasn't quite ready for the position that his father obviously put him in. I don't know if he, we don't have facts that LeBron, it feels like LeBron put him in that position with the Lakers. What are your thoughts on the commonalities between Shedeur and Deion and Bronny and LeBron?
I think it's vastly different. I think LeBron James, I think the NBA, the least they could do was to draft LeBron's James' son, Bronny James, right? I think that Bronny James has established and has demonstrated during his short time at the University of South Carolina in college that he absolutely has the NFL skill set and capabilities. But when you think about LeBron James over the last 21 years, has been a consummate ambassador of the NBA, flawless, unblemished off the court, and has been nothing but an outstanding player, arguably the greatest player to ever play. So I think the least the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver could do is to make sure that LeBron James plays with his son and fulfills the one wish that both LeBron and his son Bronny James had. I mean, think about all the players LeBron James had to play with, whether he wanted to or not. Why not go ahead and give him that one final wish and create history to allow him to play with his son on the same team at the same time?
Great perspective. Well, I appreciate you for that. Now we're going to take a turn. You mentioned that LeBron had an unblemished record. Right. And I believe Well, actually, that's not even the case at all with this next subject.
Yep.
That's not the case at all. So we're gonna pivot to Shannon Sharpe.
Uh-huh.
And last week was a it show with all the allegations that turned up with Shannon. But prior to this, just for those that may not have known, Shannon, there was a debacle a couple of months ago where Shannon claimed he accidentally went live on Instagram and was obviously in an intimate situation with a young lady. The internet heard everything. Afterwards, he came back on his Instagram and claimed that he had been hacked. When that didn't work out, he apologized. It's a lot of fumbling happening. And that was not handled correctly, in my opinion, as a publicist. And then moving forward to this situation where a young lady has come out. There have been text messages revealed on both sides. A lot, just a lot. Let me just, from the beginning, when you start hearing this second wave of information with this young lady, this initial Jane Doe that, now we met as Gabrielle Zuniga, what are your thoughts, and were you a fan of Shannon Sharpe prior to this?
Yeah, my initial thoughts, I thought it was just sad. There was a little bit of unbelief. Like, I can't believe this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, he was like at the apex, the white hot of stardom.
Yeah.
And he was just about to receive $100 million reported podcast deal. And then this sad, tragic news drop. And the thing that makes it worst of all is this is something that was unavoidable. This is something that he put himself in this unfortunate position. When you think about it, Christal, he just wasn't an ordinary man. He was a multi-millionaire.
Yeah.
And we've heard through our entire life, when you get the money doesn't change you. It just amplifies who you really are. This is a 56-year-old, well-built man, very successful man for decades. Had unlimited resources and had decided to entertain and sustain a relationship with a 19-year-old girl. Essay allegations aside, okay, if I'm ignorant for a second, I could understand for a weekend. I could even understand for a week. But this is something that's been going on for years. So that alone is alarming because, again, this is a man of unlimited resources. And he's, from my understanding, lives in Atlanta, which is the land of some of the most beautiful women in the world, that he has a pick of the litter of. And this brother decided to put all the chips in the middle of the table, if you would, knowing or unknowingly, for a 19-year-old, little girl or young girl. I don't want to be disrespectful in any shape or fashion, but I can't emphasize this enough, Christal. They always say when you get money, it just amplifies who you really are. Shannon Sharpe showed the world, knowingly or unknowingly, that's who he is.
Mm.
That's what we wanted.
Well,
he could have got anybody. He decided to pick that 19-year-old young lady.
When you saw the there's a lot to unpack here. And I agree with you that money amplifies, right? And a lot of people think money fixes things or it matures you. And I don't believe it does any of that. In fact, it may stunt some of that maturity because you have access and, you don't get some of the life lessons that teach you because you have, people want so much from you. So I actually think it stunts your growth a little bit. But my question to you again, there's been this stereotype. I think it's changed a little bit. As you mentioned LeBron James earlier, having this stellar reputation and this being this stand-up guy. His relationship with his wife is one that's praised, as one of the few athletes that, has Black love represented in his marriage. But there has been a stereotype for years, specifically when I was growing up. I went to University of Oklahoma, and it was widely talked about that, athletes get to a certain level and they go outside of their race for a young lady. And I believe there was a lot of truth to that. I do think things are changing because I think we as a people and a community are becoming more aware. And I think a lot of times the issues that were causing that to happen are changing. But when you read text messages from a 19-year-old white young woman saying, I can't wait to get that big black baby inside me. I can't wait to get to the baby. Just as a man, not even, let's take away the football pass. What is the reason? In the words of Cardi B, what is the reason that you would still continue to entertain something that is obviously transactional only in nature for this young lady? Just your thoughts as a man, reading some of that. It was offensive, to read, but I'm not naive enough to know that race does not play into a lot of those relationships in a sexual nature. So what is your thoughts on just seeing that the correspondence, the text messages were not personal in nature. They were all transactional, and he was a willing participant.
I was awestruck. It was an awestruck situation. And again, I think only Shannon could really speak to what he was thinking. Obviously, when you hear some of the details, one of the things that you talked about them wanting to put a baby in her and $25,000 allegedly per cheek and things like that. So those are evidence of a transactional relationship, and it also speaks to or makes one speculate, what kind of money was Shannon talking about or lavishing on this young lady for her to comfortably put in text that type of money. And I just think with Shannon, over the last several years, he's done an extraordinary job building up his brand and created like a genius-like TV persona in Unc. And we, as sports fans, have affectionately and humorously embraced and celebrated that persona of Unc. But in our own lives as uncles, we look for them to provide words of wisdom, give life stories, life experiences, and provide some humor, comic relief. What we do not expect from our uncles is what transpired with Shannon, and unfortunately, again, he placed himself in this situation. And it's just, like you said earlier, I think that it was a travesty that was multiplied when you seen the text message that were released, and then also I think the damaging audio or information from or confession, quite frankly, from Shannon's lawyer that said that he offered $10 million. Now think about that. $10 million, not $1 million to a 19-year-old, right? $10 million. And again, it just goes to show, monetarily wise, what type of conversation were they having privately? It's none of our business, of course, but think about that. As 19-year-old, you tell a 29-year-old, I give $1 million. She's like, okay, where do I sign? But for a 19-year-old to reject the alleged $10 million offer,
right?
It just more questions just come to mind, and it's just like prayerfully, all things work out. It seems like Shannon Sharpe is going back to a familiar strategy with respects to compartmentalizing what's going on, and with the $50 million lawsuit, he still has the Club Shay Shay going, and he still has the Nightcap going. He's doing a phenomenal job on both those platforms.
Yeah, I noticed. I saw the Nightcap, and I was actually impressed that he was still able to continue. But I do believe he said that he was taking a step down. I would say to you, in my professional opinion, as a public relations practitioner, that was a suggested move by Disney, because it sounds better if talent acknowledges doing that. If I tap you on the shoulder and say, it's about time for you to do it, so we work this out. I don't believe that was something that he decided to do. I believe that's something that Disney imposed upon him and allowed him to do it.
I agree with that, Christal, and also that's what I'm curious about. Now that the NFL draft is over, it still seems like he's moving full steam ahead with the NBA playoffs. Again, he's doing an outstanding job with that. But I'll be curious and we'll be closely monitoring, when does Shannon decide to step down from his own platform? Because that is the one shining positive thing, that if he just was signed exclusively to the ESPN, he'd be done. He'd be finished. There's nothing to pivot to.
That's a good lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, but brilliantly in business-wise, very shrewdly, he already created his own platform and has a strong following, because although there's some dips in the viewership, there's still strong response and consistent viewership today once he airs his shows.
Mm-hmm.
But there's two. I'm sorry. Lastly, I did notice last night when I watched Nightcap, two prominent sponsors that was there prior that are no longer visible on his platform. Number one is DraftKings. If you remember, famously prior, he had the emblem of his face, and then he had like a V or something like that. That V is no longer visible in the upper right corner. And then lastly, Boost T-Mobile was famously presented in the middle of the screen as a major sponsor. If you look at Ocho Cinco's screen, there's a jacket that covers that. And then if you look at Unk's screen, it's just not even visible.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure more is to come, because you got to, and I said this last week when I had another journalist on talking about this, because it's not necessarily, when it comes to brands like Boost Mobile, that's a huge commercial corporate brand, right? It has nothing to do with personal feelings. It has everything to do with stakeholders and money. And when something like that has happened, specifically, even though this has not gone to trial yet, the evidence released on both sides is so distracting, right?
Yeah.
And away from what they want their brand associated with, that it is in their best interest to sever that relationship. And I think that's 100% right. People look at it like, the brands are trying to get rid. No, that is not race-based. That is strictly based on what will happen with that stock, if not, and how people look at that brand. And I think that's something that, I want to be very honest about for myself as a publicist. If you work with one of those brands, those PR and marketing people are looking at what is happening, and what the public opinion polls are saying about the people that represent that brand. And Boost Mobile is one that you don't see a lot of celebrities representing. And that's for a reason. There's a rigorous process that talent has to go through before they get those type of deals, specifically to Black men that, there's racy conversation on that show, but for them to support them, that's definitely, out of the bounds. And I don't think they were wrong for withdrawing that sponsorship. My question to you, Sonny Rain says, someone told me race play with Black men is more common than we know. That shocked me, even though I'd heard that before. Like I said, going to the University of Oklahoma, I've heard that. But I want to ask you, as an athlete and someone that has remained in that business. I know you coach, you do sports journalism, and you also coach young men. Do you feel, Jamal, that there is often a conspiracy when a Black man gets to a certain level? You mentioned that, to the average 19-year-old, $10 million, it changes your family, not just you. $10 million can change the trajectory of your entire lineage, right? Realistically, if you do the right things with it and get the right people involved, $10 million that would be difficult to blow through quickly, right? $1 million, yeah, 10, that's a little different. So for a 19-year-old to turn that down and to seek even more, at this point, 50 million, begs the question, who else is involved? Who is advising her? What is there a conspiracy behind this? Just asking purely from your perspective and your opinion, do you think that there is some truth and some brevity to the fact that a lot of times Black men that get to a certain level of success, specifically when it's crossover success like Shannon Sharpe is having at this moment, do you think that there are people strategically looking to take that away?
Yeah, that's something that has been endlessly and counted countless times has been spoken by so many prominent African American male and females in all walks of sports and entertainment. You know, Damian Wayans was just on. Speaking of Shannon
He
Sharpe,
was. Damon Wayans was just on in his
phenomenal interview. Highly, advise anybody who has not seen that show on Club Shade to watch the interview. Riveting guest in show in its entirety. But he even said, the more money you make, the less black people you see, the more white people come around you because they become your accountants. They become the people to help you manage your money, grow your money, sustain your money, protect your money. Mm-hmm. And so I think that anytime when you're talking about the caliber and the stature, the level of what Shannon Sharpe has risen his prior to the situation bulletproof and envious brand to, I think that, obviously what Damian Wayans said applies. I mean, I haven't been fortunate enough to get there yet to just speak from a personal perspective, but where Shannon Sharpe was playing at, I think that's a different rarefied air, and that's they always, well, I can't say it on air, but but I was gonna say new levels, new devils, but like new challenges and things of that nature. So, but it's just, I think it's just gonna, when it's all said and done, it's gonna go in that category, one of the greatest falls in media history. And I think it's going to serve as perpetually for all the young aspiring entrepreneurs, media personalities, media influencers that are fortunate enough to be a part of the 1%, where Shannon Sharpe has worked tirelessly to ascend to. Right. How to protect themselves, how to move, and it's just a big what not to do going forward.
So how can I want to ask you, because you said you had not ascended to those levels, but I know I know that you had quite the college football experience, right? In order to be drafted, and we're here in Atlanta for a while, so. Can you speak to just that feeling of, because I saw something that Greg Street posted, and he said, athletes are always going to be different than entertainers, because whatever they have accomplished, they have been working at since they were 5, or since they were 7. It's not a situation where someone said, hey, you want to rap and make some money. I got some money. I can put some money behind you, go in there and rap. It's something that they have been working at and living and breathing and eating since they were a very small child. When you got to that college level and you start seeing people scouting you, and a lot of people have made conversation. There was a young man at the draft last year that had a young lady that was not of color hanging on his every word, and there was a lot of flack about that. Can you speak to just being in that situation and how that may make a young man feel at that point? And then I guess, because we can't say what level people mature at, right? Most of us have never been in that situation where they would be drafted by an NFL team or NBA team. So you have had that experience. Can you speak about what that feels like and how people respond to you when they see that you're on that path?
Yeah, I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think that it's a very surreal situation. I think for me personally, I wasn't drafted. I signed a free agency with the Atlanta Falcons. But what happens is there's confirmation of all that work that you talked about since you was, for me, it started in the 3rd grade, where if it wasn't about football, basketball, track, then I sacrificed my entire life to get into that situation, to get into that position. Absolutely. I've seen uh, men and women who were divorced for decades, they never talked to each other, refused to see each other, come together to watch their son or their neighbor play. The power that people treat you different when you occupy that spot, right? Once you are that star athlete. I remember famously a few of my teachers in elementary school and even high school very mean to me. told me I'm never gonna amount to nothing. And then, these were white teachers, and then they were gushing. They were so tickled to tell their neighbors, their girlfriends, families, when they went to Boston College games, they was like, "Oh, this is your mom. I thought I'm in the fourth grade." And so just seeing people do a complete 180, and the people that was mean to you, short with you, maybe even disrespectful to you or dismissive to you, now they prioritize you, they appreciate you, they do anything for you. So it is, as 50 Cent famously said, it's like getting a facelift, right? Because you go from an afterthought to top priority, and you literally go from not knowing no one to having access to getting on a phone or being in the company of anybody, literally in a very short span.
Can you speak specifically about the relationship with women? Because that's got that's.
Well, shoot. Well, women, I mean, it's you have access. You have access. There's less work involved, if you want to use that type of concept. Like they just.
Is there any work involved?
Well, for some, though, it depends. It depends what tier of woman you're looking for, or what you're dealing with. But I think that not most, but there is a healthy demographic of women that try to align themselves with certain athletes because they may see the future. Not even what I know at this age, not even necessarily just because of monetary, which is very attractive, as illuminating as this light in my face is. But I think also it just screams the path of success. It screams that this young man understands what it takes to be successful, is willing to suffer to be successful. My mom and my daddy will be so proud because I can't recall as many different women. I don't want to be like I'm this promiscuous guy or anything like that. But during that time frame of me being an athlete, there hasn't been a household I went into that I wasn't welcomed and celebrated. And, people tell me things that I probably should not have seen. But I think that it's understood in the United States that star athletes at the collegiate level, professional level, will be adorned, will be appreciated, respected. And again, they look at you differently. They do treat you differently. And that's just the truth.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That honesty. A lot of people in the chat are asking about you specifically.
Yeah, let me get some questions. Hey, come on.
Yeah, you guys, let us put your questions for Jamal in the chat. I've seen some questions. Haitian gonna come with you now. She asked, did you ascend to the levels of race play? I think someone mentioned earlier that you were from Boston. We know Boston is a very racist. Has been allegedly a racist culture. And so Haitian asked, let's know about you, Jamal. Did you ascend to the levels of race play? Or were you ever approached by a woman that's not of color, with that type of energy?
Absolutely. I mean, especially here in Boston. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, you are who you are, right? So whatever you was taught, however you was raised, however you decided you're going to present yourself or respond in the world, especially at Boston College, when you're talking about only 9% black or just Black, Asian, that whole spectrum. That's a real thing. And in Boston, no matter how successful you are, inevitably, whether you're in college or thereafter, male or female, you're gonna have to answer the question that's inevitable, which is, how long do you love a city that don't love you back, right? Because while you're playing sports, they love you as long as you're winning. But once you ain't winning, then they show their true colors as well. You know what I mean? Not all, but I'm just saying a healthy demographic. That's just it is what it is type thing. But yeah, absolutely. When you go to corporations and things like that as well, you are invited, but you're not welcome type thing. So there's a lot of psychological warfare and intellectual warfare that you engage with, that you have to be able to differentiate between a transactional relationship and a personal relationship. I think that is a very important lesson that anybody who is ambitious and want to be successful at a very high level, especially in a city like Boston, you got to have that game down. And I think you also have to have the support system to understand that that's the game that is that's inevitable once you start trying to climb that proverbial success ladder.
Mawadi says, not in Roxbury, Dorchester, or Mattapan. We love our people.
Amen. I'm from Roxbury. So so a proud born in Roxbury, Massachusetts kid.
So let me ask you this, because I was having a conversation with a celebrity client's child, and they said, I learned really early on that most people want to be my friend because of who my parents were, right? And they were able to make that distinction like in elementary school just because of being exposed to it. I asked you earlier about the situation with Shannon and this relationship that's transactional. When did you personally learn the difference, right? Because I would assume, you grow up and you get, you probably talk to girls, you're a charming guy, but things change when you got that jersey on, right? And you're representing this. So how did you come to the understanding to keep the reality in front of you that this is not real? And did you ever get caught up in the nuance of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I learned the hard way. I learned just by experience, life lessons. There was some I benefited from a lot of great white men and women for a long time. I would not have arrived at the destinations at Boston College without Mother Joyce, who gave me a thesaurus. She was my ninth grade English teacher. Kim Shareva, the Boys and Girls Club boss, who helped me immensely. But I didn't understand the whole difference between transactional relationship and personal relationship till, like, I went to therapy at like 29. You know what I mean? Because it was confused. Like, because I was winning. You know what I'm saying? I was winning. Like everything I went after, whether it was sports, and then after sports, I was in acting. So I have an after card, I have a SAG card. I'm doing movies with like Nicolas Cage, Uma Thurman, Will Smith, Eva Mendes. I was on soap operas. Then after that, I was in the financial service industry. I have my Series 6, 63, Series 7 licenses. And so up until about 32 years old, everything I went after, I received. So even if that was happening, which it was happening, it didn't deter me. I still persevered through, I think, ignorantly, or just through God's grace and mercy. It wasn't up until like I started going to therapy like around 31, 32, when my therapist kind of introduced me to emotional elevators. Hey, Jamal, don't you go from 0 to 9? And we talked about how I would describe going to networking events, and everybody want to ask me, oh, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And I got tired of that. I got exhausted of that, quite frankly. And I was just like, I want somebody to just want me for me. And so I think, to answer your question in short, it was about probably early 30s where I was introduced to the concept, and then mid-30s is when I understood it. And I immediately thought back to all of the friends that I accumulated back in Boston College who already had that game and already implemented that. And so they kind of was on a more accelerated path in the real world than I was, just solely off understanding that concept.
Yeah. That I love hearing a Black man figure out how to heal himself, as opposed to being, having so many, having continue hurting other people or trying to figure that out at other people's expense, creating more casualties of their internal war, if you will. Cancer Baby says, Jamal, why do you think we only hear about sex scandal in professional sports when it involves Black men? Surely it's not just Black men.
No, I think just like, that's just the media period, right? It's just not even in sports. You look about it in politics, look at when things happen in a tragic, worldly sense. If it's a Black man, they show their face. If it's not, they don't. So I don't think it's just a sports thing. I think that spills into just media and just how the hierarchy of the media decides to disseminate and present certain faces, narratives, and subject matters into the media. But I mean, you're right. There's hockey, there's baseball, there's other sports that are not predominantly Black that we don't really hear a lot. But I would imagine that transpires in those particular sports as well.
I also want to just say this. Sometimes what you hear, even with anybody, is not necessarily indicative of what's really happening. So I would say there's a lot more athletes, period, white, Black, and other, that are involved in situations. I know my job, as an entertainment publicist, when I did represent certain entertainers or even athletes, my job was to cover up, a lot of those issues. And so a lot of times, just because you don't hear something doesn't mean that it has not happened. That's also why, a lot of times when something does come out, then you hear other things. Oh, this happened 10 years ago, or this happened 15 years ago. A lot of times it's not that those people are just now coming out. They've come out, they've been paid off, or they've been, bullied or threatened or asked to sign. I mean, there's a lot of things that don't ever come out. Okay, Jamal, my dogs come in and out of my podcast room like they just.
Well, they know you having fun, girl.
Every week, Kane just comes in and leaves at his leisure. I thought we were done, and I thought we managed to get away. No, so they're part of the audience.
I want to say, what was the young lady that asked that last question? What's her name?
Cancer Baby asked that.
Cancer Baby. I do want to say, regardless of race, what we're talking about with respect to Shannon Sharpe, right is right and wrong is wrong, and he was 1,000% wrong. And I do look forward to the day Shannon is in a comfortable space to tell his side in a very transparent, unapologetic way. But I think we all know there's no explanation or justification to have a multiple year relationship when you're 56 with a 19-year-old girl. There's just
I appreciate you saying that. I think Charlemagne spoke out, and I think I appreciate when other Black men say something, because it's not, I think there needs to be accountability. We talk a lot on this channel about women holding each other accountable, right? And I think when it comes to that situation, men need to hold other men accountable. So, Shannon has said some things, and I know you watched the show, so you've heard some of the comments. I think he was talking to
Darnell Raleigh.
Pardon?
Darnell Raleigh, when he was saying he liked some young dick, Shannon Sharpe accused Darnell that he liked some young, and he said, why didn't you date her mother?
He did, but he was talking to someone else, and he said, well, the young one's still open wide, for me. And,
wow, yeah.
Yeah, he was bragging about it. He was he was bragging. He was like, well, because they were like, you're old. He was like, yeah, but the young one still. And it was in a very locker room type conversation. And so that's what Charlemagne was speaking to when he said that's not a flex. Like saying the young ones still open up for me at 56 is not a flex. I would say I was having a conversation with my husband and one of his friends, and I remember being 19 years old. And I think, at 19, I think women and men are built differently. So a 19-year-old young lady, yeah, she probably thinks that an older man's conversation is interesting, but she's there for other reasons besides he's just physically attractive, right? That's not why she's there. She's there because there's something that she's looking for. Fair exchange is not necessarily robbery, but the problem is she's 19. So a 19-year-old, for a 56-year-old to believe that a 19-year-old would have pure intentions with them is delusional, in my opinion. Right. Either that person is hurt, they need some type of fight. It's just not that you're not looking for a healthy relationship.
Yeah, that's why I said you can't justify that. You can't even explain that. And I can say comfortably, even in locker room talk, anytime somebody speaks, let's just say with the Shannon Sharpe subject matter, if that was introduced in a conversation amongst several players,
right,
unanimously, without hesitation, the minute the 56-19 thing came up, he would have been bombarded with questions, and we would have challenged and highly encouraged him to move on to somebody else. We would not have condoned that. We would not have entertained that for a long period of time. We might have, how they do it. You entertain it to get all the information, and then you say, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Because you want to see where the psychology is, or the validity, or how serious, or how long. Or what exactly is the motives of that relationship. But the minute all that is finalized, unanimously, we would have rejected that. We would have told him he was wrong. We would have told him to move on to something else. You have no business with this young lady. That would have been unanimous.
I love hearing that from a black male athlete. You know what I mean? Just hearing that is not the status quo. No. That is not the way most men think.
56, Christal. 56?
He's 60. It's almost
60. 19? No, that's a sophomore. That's a sophomore at Boston College. That's a sophomore at Oklahoma. That's a sophomore at Georgia Tech. That's a sophomore.
Yeah.
That's a sophomore.
Or a freshman, depending on when their birthday is.
Yeah. You lived 15 lives after that already.
She's got another quote from Shannon. I don't date my age. I date my wage.
See, yeah, a lot of stuff is coming back to bite them, in my opinion. I mean, famously, Monique told him repeatedly.
She tried.
Yeah, you don't need to be going after these young girls. You need to get you a girl that's going to cook for you and rub your feet and, give you some of this cognac that you're promoting and have a good night.
Yeah, love on you and that. Do you think that Ocho has been very careful. He's been
very quiet. I was going to say that too, Christal. Earlier, Ocho has been noticeably, and I want to say this in a very nebulous tone, right? Not good or bad, but he has been noticeably quiet about the whole Shannon Sharpe situation. And I know privately, he's been supportive as best he can, as capable as he can. But I would be curious to know the private conversation between Ocho and his wife. You know what I'm saying? Like that whole thing. How long will that be tolerated, or will she encourage him to continue on with that? Because I know she said on her own show that that's a lucrative thing for Ocho, and she definitely highly encourages that.
If you remember when the IG Live happened, Ocho was supportive, but he was also held him accountable. Like,
right.
What's going what?
And that's the example of the locker room. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I appreciated the fact that he did support, but he also did hold his friend accountable to the fact that was unacceptable.
Correct.
Behavior. Tammy says Shannon should have sat his ASS down with Cheryl Underwood. Cheryl did make a play for him.
Yeah.
He rejected the play.
And I think they had history. I think they went on a date when
they
they
did.
were
They had gone on a date earlier. They had gone on a date earlier, and much when they were much younger, and Shannon wasn't interested, and she moved on.
I can't wait
I'm just asking this. You guys put questions in the comments for Jamal if you have additional questions for him.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, ask me anything. Let's go.
Okay, so y'all see he's with the.
Let's go. Let's ask some real questions. What's on your mind? What's on your heart? What's on your spirit? I want to hear it.
You done opened up the gates. I just want to say it's after dark. So yes, we're ready. And Sonny Rain said, "Are you ready?" It's after dark.
Let's go. Let's go. I got the mic. I got the mic in my hand.
Let's introduce Jamal to the XO family. My question is, not Jamal. Do you know New Edition? Hey, come on, Jamal. Do you know New Edition?
Of course. My cousin Coco used to date Mike Bivens back in 84, 86, around that time. So yeah. Can you stand the rain? I'm that New Edition fan.
He lives here in Atlanta now. Jamal, my question to you is, you hear that when I have not asked you what type of women you date. I'm sure the chat will get around to that. But you hear someone like Shannon who has children with Black women, right? But has been very honest and very open about his preference for non-African American women at a later point in his career. And then when he receives flack because of it, well, I got kids with a Black woman, so I have no problem with a Black woman. What is that? What is that?
I mean, that's his honest thoughts. I mean, I think that's a fair response, right? We don't like it because it sounds defensive. It sounds like there's an unhealed insecurity thing. I think that it may be, he's tired of being asked that for its entire life.
Right.
I think that also has to do with, being in America, that's like taboo, even though it's accepted. It's only accepted in like certain circles at certain times, and there's different qualifications and layers to it. So I think that was just his honest thoughts about, hey, this amount years old, I love who I love, and this is who I love, and just accept it. But I think it's people's own ideologies that they're just not comfortable with somebody being that direct, because that's just not how they see it. They see maybe a Black man should love a Black woman, and the fact that he's so stern about and unapologetic about, I'm not going that route no more. This is what I want.
We don't like it.
Yeah, they just can't accept it, whoever they may be. I think he's just tired of, anytime somebody responds like that visceral and that sternly or with so much conviction, it's because he's probably tired of being asked that his entire life. And it's just people not accepting. When he does give you the answer, you just have more questions. When he answers his question, you have more questions. And I think that's why you hear him say however he said it, because he has been very consistent as long as I've known him and followed him, that, that's his preference.
Tammy asked, Jamal, do you disclose or not disclose the fact that you were an athlete when you first start dating?
It's a great question. No. And that's something that it starts in college, actually. Other teammates, when we hear teammates approach women and say, hey, I was Mr. George, or I'm the starting running back, or I'm the starting wide receiver, we frown about that, and we clown that particular play when they get back in the locker rooms or the cafeterias, because when you're an athlete, it's a badge of honor. But when you take pride in that, it is something you want to keep private. and you do not want to insert yourself into the shark's tank, if you would, for lack of a better word, because they're coming. You know what I mean? Once you do disclose that, especially at the professional level, because they immediately attach that to finances and monetary. So to answer your question, no, we used to say famously we were managers at Blockbuster, or we used to pick jobs that were just not desirable, or something that would allow a woman to only continue to pursue us because she was genuinely interested in us, and as opposed to what we can do for her or who she think we are. So yeah, it's rare.
I would say that was a good question. But I do think there are certain giveaways, and not who I am today, Jamal, at all. But back in my heyday,
yes,
I would say I could kind of tell, because it's just a different energy.
I agree.
It's a different energies. I mean, it starts with the build, and it's just a different energy. So a lot of times we could be in a club and be like, you just pick them out, So
you know what it is, Christal? I'll tell you what it is. When you talk about the energy, because I use that word as well, there's a stark distinction between someone who achieved their dream and someone who didn't.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
And like, we don't, as athletes, look at it that way. Like, when we are only part of like 3% of the high school athletes that play collegiate level, only 3% do that. We don't even like receive that. We don't even celebrate that. But that is a dream come true, because 97% of men wanted that and didn't get that. And then when you're even more fortunate, your good fortune continues and you're able to be part of the 1% that actually play pro football. That's a second dream. Matter of fact, that's the third, because the fact that you actually played, you got on the field regularly, is a dream come true. Because there's men that go to college and never play.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that there's also a focus that's different. Just from my experience in interacting with them, there's a different type of focus. And you have not had your feelings hurt until you have had, someone that wants to, they're serious and focused, and that's athletes, I think, across the board that are trying to do it at that level. Yes. Chance the Baby asked a question: are players telling their teammates to be careful around groupies, or do they encourage them? What do the leagues do to protect young, naive players? I want to say something before you speak to that, Jamal, because I had the fortune to work for Shedeur Sanders at one of his charity camps. He did a football camp every year for high school football players that were, that were getting a lot of attention and, were very celebrated. And he actually did a workshop. He had workshops on all these different things. And he did a workshop specifically on how to interact with groupies. And I remember thinking that was so intuitive of him. And, I have so much respect for Dion. Absolutely. Because I was able to watch him interact with these boys. Now, there are around 100 kids there. They're all looking up to him, just like his sons, right? And he's talking to them eye to eye, and it was a beautiful thing to see. Some of the parents were there, but mostly it was just the boys, for a lot of these conversations. Just, you just see beautiful Black boys in here asking questions, being vulnerable, because this is someone that they look up to, and he is giving them the real. And so no matter what, he's definitely a flashy person, but I saw his heart at that camp. And for him to he brought in some women that were wives of football players, former football players, and they talked to the guys very, very transparently. And these guys were in high school. And I think that those very, very blunt, transparent conversations are needed so much more. So I do want to say that I did see that Dion does do that. And the response from the guys is crazy when you see, because these are guys that don't see themselves as victims or prey. right? But for them to hear that they can be the prey and the girls, the dynamic can be shifted, it was interesting. And I think that's very, very much needed. So I'll let you answer that as well, Jamal.
Yeah, no, I think that was well said. And also, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to find a better man, a better coach, a better father than Deion Sanders as far as the development and preparation for success, future success, right? Because he's been at the highest level. In his book, Beyond the Glory, which I read back in college, phenomenal book, highly recommend it for anybody who hasn't read it yet. He talked about how after he won the Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers, he looked around and said, "This is it." And he famously drove off a cliff to try to commit suicide. And he was unsuccessful. And that led to a life in a relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just to answer your question, absolutely we discussed that. We discussed it a lot amongst ourselves, especially the thing I love about sports the most is this. I come in as a 19-year-old. I'm in a locker room with 120 guys, and there's guys from 23, 22, 21, 20, and 19 years old. So I'm getting all of these life experiences, all these stories as far as what they encounter or what challenges they face, what girls are saying, what girls are doing, not doing, things of that nature. And I'm able to get all that information from a very early age, as 18 years old. As everything's accelerated. Mm-hmm. They absolutely warn you, but at the end of the day, again, like I said, you are who you are. And I remember famously my junior year, and it was two superstar players. We went to the cafeteria, and there was some young ladies. They definitely looked like high school girls. This is during the summertime, and they said, "Oh, we're having a party at this dorm room later on today. Everybody's invited." I remember us all talking about it at the cafeteria, and we all said they definitely look like they're in high school. And long story short, whoever went to that party ended up getting a SA charge.
Wow.
And two of them got kicked off the team, and two of them, the other two, got court cases that followed them. And so mm-hmm. I couldn't believe that they actually went. But again, you are who you are. You like who you like. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. But yeah. that is definitely preached. I can't emphasize this enough. More wisdom, good counsel, and just great information is always being circulated in a locker room. And it's just a matter of there's always going to be a handful that have to find out the hard way. But 95% of the time, you're getting great information. That's why you do so well in sports, and a lot of times it translates into life as well.
Nice. I remember being at OU when there were I remember being told to stay away from the football dorms, right? Because there were several situations of SA that happened, and it would be like one girl. And then I remember my mom always told me, don't ever be the only girl in a group around a bunch of men, you know, and sure enough, when I got there, there was a young lady that had a situation, and those young men got charged. Before we move on to this next question, I want to ask you how popular is the idea of groupthink, right? Because I remember seeing some situations on the college campus where there would be a group of guys, and maybe two of them were really gung-ho about being disrespectful, and the rest did not feel comfortable coming out saying that's wrong. But you could just kind of see like, well, we're all doing it, so. But you could always see like one or two that were just like, I don't really want to be here. And I wonder how, especially with younger men, when you're around people that are doing the wrong thing, how difficult is that to say, no, I don't want to do that, even if the people around you are, specifically when it comes to like athletes in locker rooms where, you know, you want to be a part, being a part of the team is a big part of, you know, the brotherhood that you all have.
Yeah, well, for us, I don't recall it ever being hard. When we're talking about the subject matter that we're talking about, just as far as women, I guess I just was around extremely confident men, young men, who we always felt like we get another woman, right? We famously would go out to nightclubs, and let's say there's 4 or 5 of us in a vehicle. We'll say, hey, we gotta, whoever doesn't come back with 20 numbers can't get back in the car. You know what I mean? Like, to just practice talking to women, and some of us got really good at it. But like, I just think that, like
What
you
is the
said
key?
earlier,
What is the key to getting? What is the key to getting really good at it?
repetition. Understanding that you gotta maybe talk to 10 to get 2. So it's a numbers game, but you just got to be fearless, and you got to be able to handle rejection, right? Because it's inevitable. A lot of the younger ones, when you first start off, like, man, she said no, she said no, she said no. So you see somebody, like, maybe talk to 3 girls and they all say no, and then they get discouraged and they come back to the group, and then some of them they become gun shy. So we have to tell them, hey, man, you talk to 10 yet? Talk to 10. Let me see if you go 0 for 10. Or you go 0 for 10. We can see if you go 0 for 15. Let me see you go 0 for 20. And then finally, they identify somebody in the club that they think will never say no to them, just to kind of get the confidence up. And then they kind of build back up. But I mean, it's just a healthy exercise when you're 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, where you got to understand that, when you aim for nothing, you're going to hit it every time. And, you don't make none of the shots you take. So I just think it's a healthy exercise to build confidence, self-esteem, and more importantly, to persevere through adverse situations.
No, I think it applies to life. I would tell the girls that work for me, when I had 4 girls working for me doing PR, like, you need a no. If you don't get a no, you're not ever going to get a yes. So let's go for the no's. How many no's have you gotten a day? Okay, you're that much closer to a yes. So that's a life lesson that unfortunately you guys are using on us.
Sales, it transfers in sales and life as well. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. F Your Feelings, the show says, Jamal, if you were to have a conversation with Shannon Sharpe, what advice would you give him right now?
Ooh, that is a great question. Take it up with the Lord. You know what I mean? Take it up with the Lord. This will have to just be a spiritual situation. There's not much I will be able to say, because again, he put himself in a situation, and this is something that, like, a decision he made. Like, he brought this on to himself. And again, I gotta go back to it. They say money amplifies who you are, Christal. Right? Isn't that what? Because I'm exhausted of the conversation, quite frankly, of every woman saying, I gotta have somebody who's 6 feet, makes 100,000. Well, this brother made 8. Okay, this brother was making 10. He just casually, I'll give you $10 million. And this is the young lady he decided, right?
Were you surprised?
Romantically.
I
can't excite me. I'm about to go back to church and to change church yesterday and pray about that, to get that thought on my head, because I keep thinking about that.
Were you surprised when you saw the young lady?
Yes. That's not the physical features that I thought he would be in pursuit of.
For 10 million.
Yeah. 10 million. Oh, shoot. We're gonna have to blurt me out.
You're fine. It's after dark.
You're gonna blurt me me out, Christal.
You're fine. You are fine. Christina Danielle, she almost has my name. My name is Christal Danielle. Welcome, Christina Danielle. She says, did Jamal ever attend any Diddy parties?
I didn't attend Diddy party, but when I interned at Fat Farm with Commonalities Simmons and Russell Simmons, Baby Fat and Fat Farm back in 2001, my first day on the job, within the first hour, the first person Russell Simmons introduced me to was P. Diddy, or Puff Daddy back at the time. He had the famous sunglasses, the quintessential glasses that's in all the pictures. And long story short, he was like, "Oh, I heard good things about you, Playboy, and I want to invite you to a party at Justin's, which was his restaurant in New York at the time." And he wanted to take a picture with me. He was like, "Hey, yo, hurry up, let's take a picture." And I didn't have a camera at the time, and at that time it was like disposable cameras. And he was like, "Hey, Playboy, you don't got a camera on you?" I was like, "No, no." He said, "Hey, let me give you words of advice. Always be camera ready and have a camera, because you never know who you're gonna meet," and just walked away. But I end up not going to a Diddy party, but I end up seeing him, a lot over the next few years. But I didn't go to like the Hampton parties or the Miami parties or the LA parties, but I seen him a lot, and he was always a good guy. Always like words of wisdom. He was he was like a monk almost in my interactions with him. But again, I was only 21 years old at that time, so it probably was age appropriate at that time. But I do remember him famously buying out a bar of Christal, which was like 300 bottles. I thought that was crazy.
That is. Were you surprised when you saw when all those allegations came out at that point? Because you talked about him when you were younger, and I remember meeting him when I was in my barely 30, and then I remember being around him again. And when I met him when I was about 31, because I ended up media training the members of the band, and then I remember being around him again later with Dirty Money. And it was a different experience, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder, were you surprised, Jamal? We're almost done. You know what, Haitian, you are a mess. I'm not gonna give that comment out, but thank you guys for hanging in here. We're getting ready to get off. Yeah, we're almost done, Jamal. We're almost at our 2-hour mark.
Damn.
Can you hear me? No, he can't. I think his phone is out. I was going to ask him, was he surprised by the Diddy allegations after meeting him that young? I wonder if he was surprised. Russell messing with the Wi-Fi. That's hilarious from Bali. I actually heard of. That whole thing is not closed either. I agree, Tammy. But it's interesting how men don't always make that correlation. Tammy said if Shannon's daughter was dating a man that age, he would have a fit. Absolutely, but there are a lot of men. Isn't like Bill Belichick, the one of the NFL coaches, in his 70s or 80s and has a 24-year-old girlfriend who spoke up at a press conference, a bold 24-year-old, just as bold as Shannon's 19-year-old. But I mean, hey, who's the bigger idiot? The man? I mean, definitely him, because he's going to get caught, but he thinks he's using that young girl. And a lot of times the girl is sharper than he is. If Jamal doesn't come back, we're going to bid him adieu. But this has been a great episode of Grace and Gossip. I think that Jamal has been a great example of providing grace. It's definitely great to hear a former football player say that from his perspective, there was more wisdom and and knowledge shared in the locker room than foolishness. But I think there's a stereotype of like the locker room being filled with all this just misogynistic and objectification conversation. Okay, Jamal has to go. He has to go. And he said that's his mom calling. He's a great guy. Hopefully we can have him back again. I hope you guys enjoyed our guest for tonight. Please like this on your way out if you enjoyed. If you're watching on Facebook, you can like and share this broadcast. And I'll be back on Wednesday with the Dating Diaries with our good friend Scorpio Mo. You guys know we're going to get back into it. We may do a little bit more from this last couple standing. We'll see. But tune in Wednesday at 8. This has been Christal XO with Grace and Gossip. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. All right, you guys have a good week. Get off to a great, productive week. All right, see you Wednesday.